My name is Keith Whittier, and welcome to my Black History Moment. Now, there are a lot of people I could talk about during Black History Month. I could go easy. I could go Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I could go contemporary. I could go Barack Obama, first Black president. I could go Oprah Winfrey. If you had told me that a Black woman would be sued for saying that she doesn't like beef, come on. But that's too easy. That's what I like to consider low hanging fruit. I could talk to you about the two most important Black people I ever met in my life, my parents, and I could do that. But today, I'm going to talk about this guy. Today, I'm going to talk about this guy because it's somewhat timely because we're getting ready to embark on Super Bowl weekend. We're getting ready to, have all the food, have the Super Bowl plates, and sit back and relax and perhaps enjoy a halftime show. But you wouldn't know it. But this guy on your screen, and I don't mean me, but the other guy, is pretty much responsible for why the halftime show is what it is right now. Now, his name is Keenen Ivory Wayans. And some of you might know that back in the day, he co-wrote Eddie Murphy's Raw. Of course, one of Eddie Murphy's iconic stand-up performances. Keenen Ivory Wayans is credited as one of the writers. But what some of you will know, hopefully more so than a few, is that he was also the driving force behind the show called In Living Color. And Living Color was extremely popular in the early 90s. It was definitely must-see TV. It was an absolutely hilarious sketch comedy show that just didn't push the envelope. It absolutely shattered ceilings and did all the proverbial stuff it's supposed to do. It was absolutely groundbreaking, an incredible show. And if you haven't had the chance to see it, fortunately, YouTube's got you covered, and you can go and check out some of the hilarious skits. Now, this was an award-winning show. It was incredible. It developed and discovered artists such as Jennifer Lopez, Jim Carrey, Jamie Foxx, to say nothing of the fact that the Wayans family tree was just so incredibly talented. Of course, Marlon and Sean going off and bringing us White Chicks. And of course, Keenen Ivory Wayans went off and did a lot of great movies. And this was very iconic. Now, at the time, they decided during the 1992 Super Bowl that they were going to run a live episode of In Living Color. It was on a competing network. And what ended up happening was, with all due respect to the halftime show of the New Kids on the Block, millions of people, millions turned the channel to check out this live episode of In Living Color. They had a clock at the bottom of the screen letting people know exactly when the game would be back on. And instead of having a net where they were able to say cut and re-record it for their usual show, this was live. People were excited to tune in because, again, this was the top show in its time, and people were very excited about that. You know who wasn't excited about that? The NFL, because they lost millions of viewers. They were expecting their halftime show would go over. They didn't expect that they'd have to compete with this show, but they did. And as a result, they decided that the next year they needed to make a change. They decided that the next year they weren't going to let that happen. So they went out and they got themselves this guy, Michael Jackson. So we can say a lot about the halftime shows, and a lot is said about the halftime shows. Every year without fail on my social media feed after the performance, I see that was the greatest halftime show of all time, juxtaposed with that was the worst halftime show of all time. I don't know how Bad Bunny's going to do this weekend. I'm rooting for him. I hope he puts on a great show. But at the end of the day, one thing I know without certain is that if it wasn't for Keenen Ivory Wayans, we wouldn't have the halftime show that we do now. He absolutely changed the game, pun intended. So the next time you're sitting back and watching a halftime show, which will probably be this Sunday, unless you jump on YouTube and check out some of the old ones, sit back and thank Keenen Ivory Wayans, because he's the one who got the NFL to up their game. He's the one who got the NFL to say, you know what, we can't rest on our laurels. We have to make sure we're bringing great acts, because if not, we're going to get scooped. Now, I know there's another halftime show that's competing this weekend. I don't know how that's going to go. But what I do know is the origin, the godfather, if you will, of the halftime show as we know it is Keenen Ivory Wayans. My name is Keith Whittier, and that was your Black History Month moment. Hope you have yourselves a great day. Take care.